Welcome back. Welcome to another episode of Howling with the Wolf. It's been a few weeks. A lot has happened over the off season. We've seen free agencies. We've seen trades. We're gonna jump right back into this thing and get it going. For those who have watched the show before, you know the deal. You guys can fire questions away on the right hand panel of the show, and I'll answer those as we go through the show. Otherwise, we have a few topics we want to hit. For my people who are Dolphins followers, we're going to talk some Dolphins. For people who root for other NFL teams, it's the off season, so there's plenty of time to talk about anything else. The Antonio Brown trade, the Odell Beckham trade, the landscape of the NFL after free agency, and some of these trades, the NFL draft, Kyler Murray. Some of these big topics we'll address throughout the show. But I'm going to kick it off with a couple questions I had coming into the show from people on Facebook and Twitter, and then I'll go ahead and just hop into the mess. So first, I had one from Fancy Football Demons who wanted to know, do I think that FitzMagic will bring the FitzMagic to the Dolphins? For those who didn't know, the Dolphins have went on a whole month of trying to find their veteran franchise quarterback to fill their role after they traded Ryan Tannehill. They tried to, get Teddy Bridgewater. He told them no. They're looking to Tyrod Taylor. He went to the Chargers. They traded Ryan Tannehill. There was a report out that Colin Kaepernick had interest in the Dolphins, which would have been, a great storyline, and he, in my opinion, was the best option available. But they chose not to go that route, and they said, hey, we're going to sign Ryan Fitzpatrick, bring his big old beard down here in South Florida. And that's what they did. So he's going to be the Dolphins starting quarterback, barring a rookie coming in and winning the job from week one. The one thing I really love about the Fitzpatrick signing, and I do think that he'll bring some FitzMagic to the Dolphins, is that he'll be exciting. Whether the Dolphins go 0-16, 2-12, 4-12, 2-14, 4-12, 6-10, they probably won't be better than that. He's going to be exciting. He might lead the league in interceptions, but he might throw 30 touchdowns as well. So I think if you're a Dolphins fan, if you're an NFL fan, you're going to see some excitement there. It's funny that he talked about the FitzMagic nickname, and if you guys followed earlier, there was a little dispute between Minkah Fitzpatrick and Ryan Fitzpatrick with the nickname because they both have the FitzMagic nickname. And Minkah Fitzpatrick actually put a trademark out for the nickname last year and tried to get it to sell merchandise with, sell clothing, all that different stuff. And he didn't win the bid. But we asked Ryan about that, when he had a conference call earlier this week. And he essentially said there's enough magic to go around. He wondered if Minkah was his brother. These are all fun things, for a job that, Fitzpatrick probably knows isn't going to be easy. He's probably going to get hit a lot. It's probably going to be uglier than pretty. But more than anything, he knows that, hey, he gets to be a starter, and he's a older dude, a dude who probably wasn't gonna get another chance at a starting gig, but now he gets one. So I think that for him, it's something that he actually said that it's only one of these 32 of these gigs out here. So for me, it's a chance for me to ball out, a chance for me to play. So I do think we'll see some FitzMagic in Miami. Fancy Football Demon. I think that it might actually end up helping the Dolphins being better, whether you consider that help or not, being better than a lot of people think they are going to be. So that's one thing I'm watching throughout. Another thing is the quarterback conversation. Someone asked me on Twitter, and I forgot the name. My apologies on that. But he asked me if I was Dolphins GM, which route would I go as far as drafting a quarterback? Do I do it in 2019, 2020, and who? That's the big question around Dolphins. And I wrote an article on ESPN.com yesterday, Wednesday, I believe. Yeah, Wednesday, about 2019 versus 2020. And that's where the Dolphins are with this draft. They've got to decide who do they want to be their franchise quarterback. Because I compare it as a shotgun marriage for FitzMagic and the Dolphins. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement. Both parties know there's an expiration date. They're just trying to get the goodies from each other until, they both go in their separate ways. And that's the way they're both treating it. That means they've got the right quarterback. If their quarterback understands that's the philosophy and that's what they've got to do moving forward. But they've got to move forward and get this franchise quarterback. So this is the most important thing in the Chris Greer era, the most important thing in the Brian Flores era. And if they don't get this pick right, just being frank, they might not be here to draft the next quarterback, and they know that. So that's why this is so important. They've spent a lot of time looking into Kyler Murray. They spent a lot of time looking at Dwayne Haskins. Drew Lock, who's having his pro day today, they've looked into him as well. Those are the top 3 quarterbacks on the board, and they've done their research. Kyler Murray, it looks like he's going number 1 to Arizona. No matter how many smoke screens and different things they want to put out there, it looks like that's going to be the possibility. So the question comes up, if Dwayne Haskins or Drew Lock is there on the board at 13 or within a reasonable range, do you go get them, or do you stay on the tank for Tua train that a lot of people are chewing along? Tank for Tua. There's a lot of uncertainty in that plan, but like we've seen in college football, Tua has an exciting profile, and he could end up being a superstar. So it's a difficult decision. There's not without risk on both sides, and I think that Chris Greer and Brian Flores are managing both of these decisions. So to answer your question, if I was the GM, I would deeply examine this draft and see the way the draft board falls. If Kyler Murray goes number 1 as planned, I would just ask myself, who do I really like in this draft? And me personally, I like Dwayne Haskins more than I like Drew Lock. I think Drew Lock will be a maybe decent quarterback, maybe a Ryan Tannehill level quarterback. Not comparing them because I think they're different quarterbacks, but a Ryan Tannehill level quarterback where you'll be, middle of the pack, top 15, top 20, 15 to 20 range on your quarterback range, but he'll never, in my opinion, be, one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So you'll be happy with him as a starter, but you don't know if he's your franchise-changing quarterback. So for me, I would not pick Drew Lock if he's on the board at 13. I would decide that, hey, I would rather go ahead and pick a defensive lineman and defensive lineman-rich draft, or edge rusher, or an offensive lineman. Now, Dwayne Haskins, that's a different story. And I know Chris Greer likes them Ohio State boys because he drafted Raekwon McMillan. He drafted Jerome Baker each of the last 2 years. So you got Dwayne Haskins, who's not super athletic. He's a different type of player than Kyler Murray. And that turns a lot of people off because they like to see those players, and I like to see those players, running around, making plays with their legs, making an impact on the field. Dwayne Haskins is a drop-back passer. And I've seen a lot of people stereotype him. Even our Stephen A. Smith made a mistake with it earlier in the process because he's a black quarterback. People assume that he can run. Dwayne Haskins cannot run. He ran a 5.03 in a 40-yard dash. There was Dexter Lawrence, the 350-pound defensive lineman for Clemson, ran only 0.01 tenths of a second slower than him. So that shows you, the speed acumen, where you got a Kyler Murray, he's probably running a 4.4. Dwayne Haskins is a 5 flat guy. He's not the same speed guy, but he's a pure passer, maybe the best pure passer in this draft. A drop back guy, a guy who can be accurate, hit your guys on the money. And if you fall in love with him, my big thing is his experience. He's only started 1 year in the league, but if you feel confident that he can be your guy, and he's there at 13, which I'm not sure he will be, but if he's there at 13, I think you got to pull that trigger. If he's there at 9 or 10, you've got to consider trading up because you're taking a risk saying, hey, we're going to wait till 2020. There's a lot of unknowns there. A lot of unknowns about whether you'll get Tua or Herbert or Jake Fromm, whether you'll be in position for these guys, whether these guys will even be good. Tua, people forget that he's going to be a junior. He's got a family situation where, I'm not certain that he decides to come out, in 2020. We saw Justin Herbert come back for another year. What if Tua decides to come back for 2021? Now you're taking for 2021. That's a lot to ask for a new GM, with new power and a new head coach. So if I'm on the board and Dwayne Haskins is at 13 or within reaching distance, I go get him. Long-winded response there, but I hope that answers your question. Those are our 2 questions from fans coming in. I'll go ahead and jump to the comment sections and answer you guys' questions. I see Adrian Gray has a couple questions, and Mark James has a question as well. Guys, thanks as always for tuning in for these chats. We do them a little bit less frequently in the off season, but I think this is a perfect time to kind of chew on a lot of topics and try to answer what you guys want want to know from me. So Adrian Gray says, my three guys personally are Montez Sweat, Taylor from Florida, and your guy, Ed Oliver. I love, love, love Ed Oliver. I'm a Houston grad. Go Cougs. So it's a little bit of that homerism, I guess. But I've watched Ed Oliver since he was a freshman, and I said that he could play in the NFL then. I think that he's a top 3 player in this draft class, and I'm shocked that people have him in the teens and fall into the Dolphins. That being said, if for some reason Ed Oliver falls to 13, I'll run up there to the podium. I'm running to the podium to hand in that card because I know that he's going to be a guy who can impact the game no matter what scheme he plays. I don't care what size he is. I don't care whether you think that he can't fit in a 3-4 or 4-3 or whatever. I want football players. He's a football player. I think he's a Pro Bowl player. I know the Aaron Donald comparison is very lofty, but I think he's gonna play in multiple Pro Bowls, Ed Oliver, and I think he's a guy who can change your defense. So Montez Sweat's another guy who's a really good edge rusher. I like him as well. I actually like Cleveland Farrell a little better than Montez Sweat, but either of those guys would be good fits for the Dolphins at 13. And Jawan Taylor from Florida. It would be interesting to see the Dolphins replace one Jawan James with another Jawan Taylor at right tackle, but they do have holes in the offensive line, and that would be a good value need pick for them as well. So I'd like to see them get somebody a little bit more impactful on the defensive side of the ball if they don't go quarterback, but that would fill a hole for a good player as well. So Mark James says, how do you feel about the Tannehill trade? Surprised they got a 4 for him, questioning the $5 million they're paying the Titans. This was a very interesting trade for me because I used to cover the Titans. For those of you who have followed me, I guess since the beginning, I used to cover the Titans before I got out here, and then I moved on to covering the Dolphins. So this is a trade that sort of hit me on both teams. Both people have sources on both sides, and I know people out there. I was just talking to John Robinson at the Combine, and this trade happens, and I'm like, of course it's the Titans. But here's the way I think of this Ryan Tannehill trade. First of all, I'm surprised that the Dolphins were able to get a trade off. I had heard at the Combine they were trying to seek out a trade. They had decided that, hey, Ryan Tannehill wasn't going to be a part of their future, so they were planning to release him if they didn't find a trade. They got creative. And I know John Robinson was looking for, the Titans GM, John Robinson was looking for a backup quarterback, or top-tier backup quarterback to push Marcus Mariota and to give them a backup for if, and inevitably when, Marcus Mariota gets hurt. He hasn't played 16 games in his career, and he's at a really defining point of his career now because he's entering his 5th season in the last year of his deal. So I think that John Robinson found a creative way to get Ryan Tannehill, who was going to be highly sought after as a backup quarterback in this market. I think he may have saw $5, $6, $7, maybe even $8 million in base salary, maybe even more in incentives on a deal that he could have got. He may have got a deal similar to what Nick Foles got in Philly last year because he's a starting caliber quarterback who can play, and that's always an asset in this league. So for John Robinson, he ended up getting him to restructure his contract to a 1-year, $7 million deal. The Dolphins paid $5 million of that deal and a signing bonus and essentially bought a draft pick. They bought that 2024 round draft pick. That's you can look at it either way. I'll look at it this way. Miami decided that, hey, we're not going to spend money this year, and I'm coming out with a story next week on ESPN.com about the Dolphins and their money decisions and essentially how this new regime is running things. So check that out, another plug. But the Dolphins essentially said, and they're going to do this with Robert Quinn whenever that deal's done, they decided that, hey, we're going to eat money on the salary cap, get replacement level players in free agency this year, and waddle through the year as we rebuild our roster and see what fits. And in the meantime, we have to hit a salary floor anyway, so we're going to eat this dead money. We're going to eat this all on our cap and hopefully get more assets to use in 2020 and potentially go get Tua, if you're the tank for Tua Parade, or Justin Herbert or Jake Fromm or whatever. So I think that it was a very strategic trade for both sides. I really like it for the Titans side because they probably got the best backup in the league for $2 million a year, and it only cost them a 4th round pick in 2020. For the Dolphins' perspective, I think it was a necessary thing. They were going to get rid of Tannehill anyway, so they essentially paid $5 million more than they were already paying to get a 4th round pick. So essentially, it depends on how much you value a fourth round pick. Is it worth $5 million? I don't know. If you think it is, then yes, it's a good trade. If you think it's not, then it isn't. So I look at it that way. It's a little bit more up in the air for the Dolphins for that trade, but they were going to get rid of Ryan Tannehill anyway. Let's see. Adrian Gray, this is your second question here. It says Brian Hartline being a coach at OSU. So if Greer likes an OSU guy, I see Hartline putting that guy over the top. But I don't love Haskins. Yeah, there's a lot of decisions per se about who you like and don't like in this draft. There's a guy that I like in this draft that teams aren't high on, and I'm not sure the Dolphins are high on, and I understand why. Will Grier. He's one of my favorite quarterbacks in this draft. I think I might even have him. I have him definitely ahead of Duke's Daniel Jones, who I don't like at all. I don't really know why a team would spend a first-round pick on him, but that's neither here nor there. But I like Will Grier. I think that if he's there in the middle rounds and if the Dolphins decide that, hey, we're going to wait till 2020 for a quarterback, then Will Grier would make a lot of sense as a middle-round pick to sort of compete with Ryan Fitzpatrick, be a backup, and continue to develop even if they go get a quarterback in 2020. Haskins, I always like playmakers, so he can make plays with his arms, not necessarily his legs. If I was building a quarterback, it wouldn't necessarily be Haskins, but there are different ways to skin a cat. We've seen Tom Brady, one of the most immobile quarterbacks that we've ever seen, really, win Super Bowl after Super Bowl. So, and traditionally, we've seen drop-back passers have extreme success in this league. We've seen it happen with Phillip Rivers recently, Ben Roethlisberger, even the great Peyton Manning has done it for a while. So, even though it's a new era, drop-back passers still have a lot of success in this league. The experience would worry me with Haskins, but I think that he's going to be a good starting quarterback in this league. And I think that, it's up to a team that feels like they can put a good offensive line around him. And that's the thing for the Dolphins. They won't have a good offensive line early. Can you put a good offensive line around Haskins, protect him, and let him feast? And if so, then I think you got a really good situation for Haskins. Mark James, and if you guys, like I said, if you guys have any questions, just hop in the comment section and go ahead. I see you guys' questions, Adrian and Mark. Let me hold off. I'm going to jump a little bit into a couple other NFL topics, a couple Dolphins topics. Then I'm going to swing back to your questions and any other questions you guys have, and then I'm going to head out of here. NCAA tournament is going on right now, so I'm going to hop back in there, and I'm excited to see what happens for the rest of the tournament. And then we got the draft coming up in the coming days, owner meetings next week. So there is plenty of topics to discuss over the next few weeks. But I think one thing I wanted to touch on is the landscape changing after free agency. And I think I saw a stat earlier this offseason that there were only 3 or 4 players signed in last year's free agency period that made the Pro Bowl. So we look at free agency and we always say, who's the winner? Who's the loser of free agency? Who's the best team in the league now? And the Browns are the hot team because they ended up trading for OBJ. They ended up making a few moves. They traded for Olivier Vernon. They signed a few players in free agency. And I think the Browns are going to be very good. And I think you could look at them as a favorite of the AFC North. But we haven't played football games yet. And that's a key. And I think that a lot of times we overhype some of these free agents. So I think these trades change the landscape of things. And, the Antonio Brown trade was one that, you look at the Raiders getting Antonio Brown. And I don't know about you guys, but I really hope that the Raiders are on Hard Knocks this year. Because you look at John Gruden, you look at Antonio Brown, you look at Vontaze Burfict that they just signed, you look at Derek Carr and the surrounding situations involving him. Does Marshawn Lynch come back? This is their last year in Oakland, moving to Vegas. That may be one of the most interesting teams in the league. And I would love to see them on Hard Knocks. I think Antonio Brown's going to ball out this year. I think that a lot of people were down on Antonio Brown because calling him selfish, doing all these different things. And I know there's a lot of things he could have did better. But I appreciate when you see these athletes taking control of their own narrative. And oftentimes we fall on the team side of things because that's how the teams put it out there. And we're loyal to teams versus players, which is understandable. That's how we're taught to bring up. But Antonio Brown decided that, hey, he wanted to do something different. And he decided that he wanted to have control. And he pushed the leverage on his side. And he essentially forced a trade. And he'll eventually see how this works out. Le'Veon Bell did the same thing essentially not with a trade, but forcing himself out of the contract. And now he's in a situation with Adam Gase and the Jets. But now these athletes are starting to see their power. And my big thing is once athletes realize their power, their influence, their impact on the game, that's when they start to shift the dynamic between the team and the player relationship. And I think that we talk a lot about the strength of the CBA and the strength of NFL players, and the fact that MLB players like Mike Trout and Bryce Harper are getting all these $300, $400 million guaranteed contracts, where NFL players are struggling to get, no NFL players really getting over 100 million guarantees. I think all of that has to do with how NFL players and agents and the whole industry sees their power and how they take advantage of this in the coming years. And I think what Antonio Brown's doing, what Le'Veon Bell's doing, will set a precedent for what maybe other star players can do. And maybe that changes how we see the league maybe 5 or 10 years from now. And I'm excited to see that evolution. So that's my take on that. And then from there, I think I'll go ahead and talk on a couple other Dolphins topics. First of all, I do not think the Dolphins are tanking. I know that's been a popular topic, and I'll go ahead and say it, put it on video for me. I don't think the Dolphins are saying that, hey, we want to be 1-15. I think that if you do want to tank, you don't sign Ryan Fitzpatrick. Chris Grier is a very smart guy. Brian Flores is a very smart guy. I think they know that this year is going to be rough, and they know they're not going to be in the playoffs, and they are prepping for 2020 to spend big in that area, to potentially draft high in that area. But I don't think they've decided that above everything else we want to lose. Ryan Fitzpatrick signing shows me that they're trying to build this thing the right way. And my big thing with Brian Flores, with Chris Grier, throughout this whole process has been, how much patience is Steve Ross really going to give you? And how does that impact how you build this team? They're preaching patience, and I believe they're going to give them patience, and I hope they do. But Brian Flores has to build his culture right. Whether it's the Patriot way, whether it's a new Dolphins way, whether it's a combination of them both, it doesn't matter. You can't tell players to come out there and lose. And you can't put out a Jake Rudock. You can't put out a Luke Falk. You can't even put out a Brock Osweiler and say with a straight face, we're going to compete this year. We're going to work hard. We want you to give 110%. Signing Ryan Fitzpatrick, who very well may take them to 5-11 and give them the number 8 pick in the draft, tells me that they value the culture and building this thing the right way over a few draft positions. So yes, they're going to be bad, but I don't think they're tanking per se in the way that the Philadelphia Sixers were openly tanking a few years back. So that's my take on that. I know that's been a lot of topics going on there. I think they're rebuilding, and I think they're not going out of their way to signing free agents because they know they're not going to compete this year. But I don't think they're tanking. Let's go ahead and jump to a few more you guys' questions. If you have any last-minute questions, go ahead, fire them away. I'm going to answer Adrian's question, Mark's question, and then I'm going to go ahead and give it a wrap unless anybody has any other questions. So, as always, these are fun. I have a YouTube channel that I post all these videos on a day or two after. So check that out, Howling with the Wolf YouTube channel. You can see everything from this past season throughout the year and last year. And we'll do some of these throughout the season. We'll probably do one of these right before the draft. And we'll probably do one of these after the draft as well, and some sprinkled out throughout the summer. So let me know what you guys like about these chats, what you don't like time-wise. This is the first time I've done one in midday in a while. I usually do them in the evening. So let me know if this is something that intrigues you a little bit more. But without further ado, I'll shut up a little bit. Not shut up, but I'll switch gears a little bit and answer Adrian and Mark's questions. So he's asking, what do you think about Jalen Ferguson? I think he's a talented edge rusher with tons of power and good hands, but the athleticism doesn't blow me away. I like him, but wonder should I love him? Good question, Adrian. I think more than Jalen Ferguson, I think this is more of a question of production and versus potential, and athleticism versus hard work and ethic and fight. It just depends on what you value. I know there's a lot of people and writers and scouts who value athleticism over everything else, and that's fine. Athleticism, you can't teach that. There are guys who in college who, get 1 or 2 sacks and then end up becoming that elite player in the NFL. It doesn't happen as often, but it happens. But for me, I value production. I value moves, established, polish more than anything else. So I saw some of those things from Jalen Ferguson in college, and he intrigues me. I wouldn't spend a first round pick. I think he'd more be more of a day 2 guy, maybe even an early day 3 guy. But I think that those guys intrigue me. I really like Sam Hubbard out of Ohio State last year. I thought that he could have been a late first, early second round pick, and he fell to the third round because he didn't have that bend. He didn't have that athleticism. And I think the Bengals got a really good pick for him. I think he ended up having 5 or 6 sacks last year, more than some of the first round picks. So Cleveland Farrell this year out of Clemson is another guy like that. Not a super athletic guy, but he produces. He has really good hand moves. He's versatile. He's a guy I want on my team every day of the week and twice on Sunday. He may never have 20 sacks, but he's going to give you probably 6 to 10 sacks every year in this league. And I think there's value and consistency for me. So those are the type of players that I look for, and I think that Jalen Ferguson is going to be a good player for somebody. I don't know if it's the Dolphins, but I think he's going to be a good player for somebody. So I hope that answers your question, Adrian. Mark James, my man. With Jeffrey Simmons' injury, can you see him dropping into the second round? Absolutely. I actually was looking to the Jeffrey Simmons earlier today trying to figure out a good fit for him. And I actually love the Philadelphia Eagles for him. They're picking 25, so I'm not sure if they pick him there. But maybe they trade back. They already have Fletcher Cox, another Mississippi State guy. And I think Jeffrey Simmons is like the Fletcher Cox light. That's where you see his potential being. I don't think he'll be as good as Fletcher Cox, but I think he can be up to a mini Fletcher Cox. And I think he fit really well with that team, especially learning from Fletcher. But Jeffrey Simmons overall, I think that he's a guy who probably would have been a mid-first round pick if he was healthy. He's probably going to miss half of the year with that torn ACL. So you're going to probably see a team that has the luxury of essentially giving him a redshirt year, draft him. And that either means you see him in the late first, or you see a team trading back from the first round and drafting into the early second round. So I think he goes somewhere in that late first, early to mid second round range for Jeffrey Simpson. But I think that he is one of the best defensive linemen in this draft. My top defensive lineman in this draft is Quentin Williams and Ed Oliver. They're 1A and 1B for me. And then after that, I think it's really open as far as defensive linemen, interior defensive linemen. Christian Wilkins there. And then I think Jeffrey Simmons for me, especially interior defensive lineman, is right there. So a lot of info that we kind of delved out here in this chat. This was always fun. If there's no more questions for me, I'm going to go ahead and call it a day. Get back to this NCAA tournament. As always, follow me on Cameron Wolfe at Twitter, this channel on Facebook, and also as YouTube as I put along. And follow my work on ESPN.com. Thanks, guys. Until next time.